Welcome everyone, glad you're here. Today is the last lecture you're going to have for anatomy and physiology. If you've been with me since General AMP, it's been a long time. We've been together for quite a while, a lot of lectures, a lot of videos, a lot of hours together. This is the last one. And the good news is it's not a very difficult learning plan at all. So what we're going to be covering today is Learning Plan 12. And really what we're doing is we're reviewing the digestive system. We covered the digestive system in General AMP. And when we talked about the digestive system in General AMP, we talked a lot about the anatomy of the digestive system, a little bit about the physiology of the digestive system, as far as what gets digested by what. What we're basically going to do is come back and look primarily at the physiology of the digestive system, namely the processes, as you see in your notes, the processes of digestion, absorption, and what we call assimilation. So we're going to spend some time talking about what gets digested by what and what gets digested where, and how the food gets broken down, and then how it gets absorbed by the body. So we're looking at that. So it's a general overview. It's a very light learning plan, not a lot of difficult information. It's not anything that's going to be a brain squeezer or anything that's really tough. This is a great way to go out for advanced AMP. So let's just go ahead and get the PowerPoint up so you can see what I'm seeing, and then we'll hop to it here. All right. So a lot of this is going to be a review of what we covered in General AMP, but it's a good idea to come back to it just to review it so that way you understand and everybody's kind of on the same page. So if you recall, if we look at the digestive system organs are going to fall into what we call two main groups. One is the alimentary canal, and then the other will be the accessory organs. So the alimentary canal is essentially the gastrointestinal tract. It's that single tube that starts at the mouth and then will end at the anus. So really what we're doing is we've got this long tube that extends all the way through. We've got the intestines, and then finally we end here at the anus. That is what we call the alimentary canal, the gastrointestinal tract. That's the main tube. Now remember, this is an external structure, meaning that it's open to the outside environment the entire way through. And it sounds kind of strange to think of it that way, but it really is that way, that the gastrointestinal tract is an external structure, or it's exposed to the external environment. But that's what it is. It's a tube that is constantly open to the external environment, even though it's located inside of our body. So the inside of our digestive tract is never really inside of us. It's actually outside, if you think of it that way. But don't get too caught up in it. Don't think about it too hard. I'm just bringing that to your attention. Then we have the accessory digestive organs. So things that help either physically break down the food or chemically break down the food. And we have things like the teeth, the tongue, the gallbladder, salivary glands, liver, the pancreas. These are all going to either physically break down the food, like our teeth, for example, and our tongue help manipulate and move the food around our mouth so we can mechanically chew and break down the food into smaller pieces. But then we also have the gallbladder, the liver, the pancreas, which are going to create secretions that help chemically break down the food. So we're going to look at those structures today. So the digestive process, this is all review from General AMP, starts with just putting the food in the mouth. After we put it in the mouth, then we chew it up a little bit, and then we swallow it, and then starts the peristalsis, which is the muscular movement of the food throughout the digestive tract. Now we have different types of digestion, and again, if you were paying attention and follow along and recall anything from General AMP, you're going to remember our conversations about the different types of digestion. We have the actual mechanical digestion of food, which would be chewing and the churning of the stomach and the segmentation of the small intestine. But then we also have the chemical breakdown, which we call digestion. which is hitting the food that we've swallowed and that's passing through our digestive system, hitting that with digestive juices and secretions to help break that food down further, usually through enzymatic action and something similar to that. To move the food from one stage to the next, we have to propel it. We have to undergo propulsion. So it starts with swallowing, and then we have peristalsis throughout the entire duration of the gastrointestinal tract. Finally, after we've broken down the food into small enough pieces, now it's absorbed. If it's a carbohydrate or a protein, it'll end up in the capillary. But if it's a lipid, it'll end up being absorbed into a lymphatic vessel. Now remember, the ultimate goal of the digestive system is to break down the food into smaller pieces and smaller pieces and smaller pieces, so that it's small enough to be carried through the bloodstream or through the lymphatic system to a place where it can be taken into the body's cell and broken down to create energy or to create the building blocks involved in protein synthesis and those sorts of things. So that's the ultimate goal. So your first term for today is the term chemical. So some of the things we're going to talk about today are some of the things that help with digestion. What you see here on your screen and in your book are the hormones and what we call the paracrines that act in digestion. They don't actually perform the actual digestion of the food, but they stimulate the activity or stimulate the organs of the body to do something. So for example, we have cholecystokinin, just picking it up because it's the first one. If there's fat in the food that we eat, which we call chyme, or proteins, the cholecystokinin is going to target the stomach, the liver, the pancreas, gallbladder, the hepatopancreatic sphincter. It's going to stimulate all of these structures. And so, for example, it's going to tell the pancreas, you need to start to produce your pancreatic juices, because you're going to have to digest and break down things. Telling the gallbladder, okay, it's time to start squeezing out the bile. Tells the liver starting to make the bile. Stomach, well, you better in this case, it's going to inhibit the stomach's secretory activity. So you can see that some of these hormones are going to either activate or deactivate or upregulate or downregulate the function of certain organs. And so these are some of the things that we see here. There's a long list of them, but that's not really the focus of what we're going to talk about today. And this is just showing you this in a picture version, that the various chemicals that are found in the body can promote the secretion of certain things. So what they're showing you here is what is promoting the secretion of bile and pancreatic juice. A lot of it has to do with what's going on in the stomach at that time. So for example, once the digested food, which we call chyme, starts entering this area, what's going to happen is the enteroendocrine cells here in that portion of the intestine start to release their chemicals, cholecystokinin and secretin. So it's going to enter the bloodstream. It's going to send feedback to the pancreas saying, okay, better secrete your pancreatic juices. And telling the liver, you got to produce more bile. Also telling the stomach, okay, we're reaching the end here. You can kind of slow down. And it's also going to be relaxing the sphincter here to allow those digestive juices to make their way into the small intestine. So this is just a great example of of one of the chemicals of the body and how that affects digestion. This table gives you a great overview of the functions of the gastrointestinal system, so you can see what the mouth does, what the pharynx and esophagus do in regard to digestion, what the stomach does, which is very helpful. This is just a really nice overview, but it's all about breaking down the food. It's relative to our second term, which is breakdown. Continuing on with this table, we have the small intestine and the large intestine. So this is a great table to come back to and refer to if you just want an overview. Okay, what does the small intestine do? What is it responsible for? You can look at this table and it'll give you all that information in a nice, clear, concise manner. Now what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the physiology of digestion. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on what breaks down what and where. All right, so we're going to look at the different types of foods that we are ingesting, and then we're going to look at what they're broken down into and what is responsible for that. So remember now, what we're doing through digestion is a catabolic process. So we're taking a large molecule and we're breaking it down into smaller subunits. That's what we're doing. So when you look at this picture, this figure, we're going to start off with the carbohydrates. And the carbohydrates are basically digested in 3 different areas. The mouth, through the saliva, we have something called amylase, which is an enzyme that breaks down the carbohydrate in the mouth. We have a pancreatic amylase, which is a very powerful enzyme to break down the carbohydrates. And then within the small intestine, we have what are called brush border enzymes. And these enzymes break down the carbohydrates as well. Now you can see by looking at this picture, when we stick the food into our mouth, it's a large molecule. And so through the saliva and the pancreas, what we're doing is we're breaking it down, but not breaking it down completely into its smallest form. We're kind of halfway there. So we're breaking it down into an oligosaccharide or a disaccharide. And then once it hits the intestines, now these brush border enzymes are going to break it down into smaller forms, maybe lactose or maltose or sucrose, and then even further down into its most simple form, the single ring carbons, which would be galactose, glucose, and fructose. Over here now, on the far right, which is really handy, it tells how they're absorbed. So the glucose and galactose are absorbed with sodium ions through the wall in the intestine. The fructose passes through what we call facilitated diffusion. And then the monosaccharides, they're gonna enter the capillary and transport it to the liver. All right, so this figure is really nice because it tells you exactly what is breaking down what, where it breaks it down, what it breaks it down into, and then how it gets absorbed. This is an awesome, awesome, awesome figure. And we have one for the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats. Now, one thing I want you to notice on this picture is that the stomach is missing here. The stomach does not participate in the digestion of carbohydrates. This is why some people suffer from gastrointestinal upset when they eat certain things. Let's say that you're eating fruit, and then you eat fruit with protein like a steak or something like that that's a real tough, or pork, it's a tough protein that's hard to break apart if you don't chew it well. So one of the first things you need to do when you're eating proteins is you need to make sure that you are chewing your food very well, because the fact that you're chewing and breaking apart the food mechanically, that is very, very helpful because it's going to make the job for your stomach a lot easier, especially if you're mixing the protein with something that is not a protein. If you're mixing it with a carbohydrate source, especially like a fruit, because what happens is the fruit will start to break down in your stomach because it got hit with the salivary amylases, so it's going to start to digest just by virtue of that in your stomach, but it'll start to ferment if it's in there long enough. And so if your stomach has to work to physically and mechanically break apart the food that you didn't chew very well, what's going to happen is you're going to endure some suffering because you've got the fermenting fruit, which is causing gas and bloating, and the food isn't emptying out of your stomach. So you've got this uncomfortable feeling. So be mindful of what you're eating with what and what gets digested where, because it can be very difficult for your body to have to compensate for something that's very easy, like just making sure you chew your food about 10 more times or 15 more times before you swallow it. Your third term for today is the term monomer, which is a word that refers to the simplest form of something. So like a monomer of a carbohydrate is glucose, for example, or a monomer of a protein is an amino acid. So moving on to proteins, you'll notice that protein digestion starts in the stomach first. And you may recall, I don't know if I have a picture that shows this. I know we talk about it in general AMP, but I don't think we do talk about, no, we don't talk about it in this class. So if you recall, we have something called pepsinogen. Okay, so we have pepsinogen, which is secreted by one of the stomach glands in the stomach. But you also need hydrochloric acid. And hydrochloric acid is not there to digest your food. And a lot of people think, well, our food gets digested and gets broken apart by the hydrochloric acid. That's not true. The hydrochloric acid is an intermediary. And when you combine pepsinogen with HCl, it converts pepsinogen into pepsin. And pepsin is what digests the protein in your stomach. So here's the thing. People take antacids and they think, well, I've got problems with acid reflux. Well, part of the acid reflux might be, and I'm not treating this loosely, okay? So I'm not trying to throw out a solution that just disregarding the seriousness of something. So sometimes acid reflux might result from not chewing your food very well. Or it might result from something else that's going on within the chemistry of your stomach. Well, very loosely though, people will say, oh, I've got acid reflux, or I've got this digestive issue, or I've got digestive problems. And so they throw an antacid at it, or they take some sort of over-the-counter that's going to affect the production of the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. Well, here's the thing. You have to be very cautious when you do this, in my opinion, because one of the problems with digestion is that people don't have enough production of hydrochloric acid. If you don't have enough hydrochloric acid, you don't have enough to convert the pepsinogen into pepsin. And if you can't convert pepsinogen into pepsin, you're going to have a hard time digesting your food. So what happens, people will pop like the Rolaids or the Tums or something like that, thinking that that's going to help their problem. It's not, because what you're doing is you're canceling out the hydrochloric acid. So now you're making it harder for your food to digest, number one. And number two, a lot of times those products come with calcium in them. Now, it's not a very good calcium. It's called calcium carbonate, which is a very low absorbing form of calcium. So if you're taking Tums just for the heck of it, just so you can get some calcium, that's like the worst kind of, in my opinion, and the scientific studies have shown it, that's like the worst type of calcium you can take because it doesn't absorb very well. But what's even more laughable, in my opinion, is that the way that your body absorbs The calcium is through the acid. So if your body doesn't have enough acid, you're not going to absorb the calcium that you're trying to absorb in the first place. So just think about it, what you're putting in your body and what the actual purpose and the desire is. A more conservative approach that might work well and serve people well is considering digestive enzymes, because a lot of these digestive enzymes contain the enzymes that your body might be lacking or not producing. And a lot of times the digestive enzymes, especially the really good ones out there, do contain some hydrochloric acid. So they're actually introducing hydrochloric acid into the stomach so that the stomach has sufficient hydrochloric acid so that it can convert the pepsinogen into pepsin to aid in the protein digestion of the stomach. So there's some things to consider and just think about in regard to the stomach and just the digestion overall. So just from a conservative standpoint, before you grab in my opinion, okay, this is what I would do if it were me and I was having issues with gastrointestinal issues like reflux and indigestion and bloating and gas and stuff like that. My first step would be to try taking a really nice, high quality digestive enzyme. And they are easier and easier to come by these days. You go back 10, 15 years, they were harder to come by, but now people are understanding the importance of these things and how they can benefit us. So I would start there and see how that works for you. And then after that, if that's not working, then maybe pursue some other option, if it were me. All right, so we start off with the large molecule of proteins. And in the stomach, through pepsin, we break them down into larger polypeptides. So these are larger chains of amino acids, but not as large as the original protein. Once we get to the pancreas, now we hit the proteins with some very powerful pancreatic enzymes like trypsin and chymotrypsin and carboxypeptidase. And so we're breaking these into even smaller portions. And then finally, when we hit the brush border enzymes of the small intestine, now we have amino acids like the dipeptides and tripeptides. We're breaking them down in even smaller forms. Now we can take these and we can absorb these. They're small enough to be absorbed. So again, here is how these get absorbed through the wall of the small intestine. And again, the proteins are going to be transported through the capillaries. Now we've got the fats. Everybody seems like they're hitting the fats here. We've got a lipase in the mouth that starts breaking down the fats. Then we've got lipase in the stomach. We've got bile from the small intestine. And then we have a lipase in the pancreas. And it's all designed to take a triglyceride and break it down into its two components, which would be the fatty acids and the monoglyceride. So the way we do this is through emulsification. You see the term unemulsified. Emulsification is basically the process of taking a large fat globule and breaking it down into smaller fat droplets and smaller fat droplets and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. So if you think about if you're cooking at home and let's say you're cooking a meat or something like that, and you cook it in a pan or you put it in a pan or whatever, afterward you're going to get that residual grease in the pan that comes from the animal fat. And so if you just take water and try washing out that pan, it doesn't work very well. But if you introduce a detergent to it, if you introduce like a dish soap, for example, all of a sudden that fat starts to loosen up and it starts to lift off of the bottom of the pan. And that's because the soap is an emulsifier. It's a detergent. And what that is doing is it's actually kind of breaking the fats into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces so that the water can actually get underneath it and liberate it from the side of the pan. So what you're doing, the fat isn't going away, but what you're doing is you're breaking it into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces so that they're so insignificant that you can wash them away with the water. So it allows the water to get wetter, if you want to think about it that way. So that's kind of what soap does. It makes the water wetter. It helps the water work better. And that's really what is happening here with the digestive products in your body, especially the bile. The bile is that detergent. It's that detergent that performs that detergent action to really hit the fats and break them apart so you can break them into their smaller subcomponents. Now, unlike the carbohydrates and the fats, we need to absorb those through, well, let's go back a step here. Let's circled what I did not intend to circle here. All right, let me go back. All right. So what we need to do, the fatty acids and the monoglycerides, they're recombined to form a triglyceride. And then what happens is they get packaged in something called a chylomicron, and then they get transported through the lymphatic vessels, a special lymphatic vessel called a lacteal. And then that'll basically hook up again with the cardiovascular system. So they get in the cardiovascular system, but it's just that the doorways of the capillaries are too narrow to get these chylomicrons into, so they have to go into a doorway that's large enough for them, and that's in the lacteals. Some of the short chain fatty acids, they can be absorbed through the capillaries, but for the most part, the fats are going to have to be processed as chylomicrons to make them water soluble, because fats and waters don't get along, and then those chylomicrons have to enter the lymphatic circulation. Now, we also do ingest nucleic acids. We do ingest genetic material and genetic subunits in the food that we eat, so we have to break those apart as well, and we can use them. So the way we do that is through the enzymes in the pancreas and the small intestine, and we can absorb them through the capillaries. All right, so the rest of what I have here is just talking about absorption. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's not at the heart of what I want you to understand and what you need to understand here anyway. But what we're trying to show you here in this picture is what's happening in the small intestine. So we've got a protein here, for example, which is a amino acid chain, okay? And what's happening is we have the pancreatic enzymes, and we also have some brush border enzymes. And what they're doing is they're breaking apart these strings of beads into their individual subunits, their monomers, which are amino acids. What we see here is that this amino acid gets absorbed along with sodium. So as sodium comes along, so does the amino acid. And then we have that amino acid carrier, then which will transport the amino acid through the cell wall, the wall of the intestine. This is the cell of the intestine here, and get it into the capillary. Okay, so that's what they're showing you here. This is what I was talking about before with the emulsification of fats. You got a large fat globule, and we break it apart into smaller fat droplets through the detergent action of bile. Now you can see that we cover them with these bile salts. Then what happens is we package it into these protein packages called chylomicrons. So now it's a lipoprotein, now it's water soluble, and then we can transport it into the lacteal so that it can be carried away. Remember, lymph is the same thing as plasma, and so the lymphatic vessels will just lead you right back to the cardiovascular system, dumping into a duct, and it'll take care of it. All right, so carbohydrates. So we've got some monomers here. We've got fructose, or we've got glucose, or we've got galactose. Again, co-transported with sodium. So sodium comes across, so does the monomer. Fructose, we also have a facilitated diffusion transporter that can just actively, through ATP, push the monomer into the wall of the intestine. And then again, we have a pump here that's going to pump the glucose monomer into the cardiovascular system. And those pumps require the use of ATP. All right, so that's it. That's it. That puts a cap on it. That is all we have for you today. So I just wanted to thank you all for those of you who've been with me for 2 semesters. Thank you for a wonderful 2 semesters. It's been a great time, not only talking to people here in the class, but also the camera, because that's where most people are watching this anyway. But thank you all very much for being a part of this and being a part of the class. I hope you really enjoyed the way that the class was delivered. You enjoyed the format. It's been a pleasure. I know that I don't get to see a lot of you. I don't get to see many of you in person, but hopefully over the 2 semesters, we've gotten to know each other a little bit through our discussions and our conversations here. And I do wish you the best. If you ever need anything, if you need a letter of recommendation, if you need a reference, if you need anything from me, don't hesitate to reach out and ask. So again, thank you so much for a wonderful 2 semesters. I wish you all the luck and the best of luck in the future. And if you ever need anything, just let me know, all right? Thanks a lot. Take care. We'll see you. Bye.